Joining me now to discuss all the latest from the region, as well as the seemingly pro-Hamas slant being demonstrated by the Obama administration, Abe Foxman, National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. Abe, we thank you for joining us from Newsmax, New York this morning.
It's good to be back.
Abe, what is your reaction to what Mrs. Clinton had to say on fusion yesterday?
You know what? I'm not sure I really focused in on what she was saying.
Well, Abe, there were words to the effect of, I can understand, and this is a paraphrase, but she was speaking about civilian casualties in Gaza and almost the necessity. It seemed to be suggesting that there was a necessity for Hamas to use offices, schools, civilian areas because of the congested space, and so that prompted civilian casualties. It almost seemed as if the former First Lady was, in essence, giving Gaza a pass, at least to my ears.
Well, you know, I'm not sure that's what I heard, but she's been out there defending Israel's right to defend itself. She has been condemning Hamas. She has been condemning the use of civilian institutions such as hospitals and UNRWA schools. So I don't see this as a departure from her very, very clear view about Israel's right to defend itself and the need to find some solution somewhere not too far in the distance.
Well, Abe, I wanted to ask you also about the current Secretary of State. He's also received a lot of criticism for his efforts trying to broker a ceasefire deal here. And of course, there was that unanimous decision by the Israeli Security Council to reject the Kerry-backed ceasefire. Do you think some of the criticism to Kerry is unfair?
Yes, I do, and I've said so. This was not a Kerry peace proposal. It was misnamed, whatever. It was a draft that the Secretary of State, I understand, shared with the Israeli cabinet, asking for their reactions to this draft document. It was not a Kerry proposal. It was a working document. It was, in fact, confidential. There are differences between the United States and Israel, and there are disagreements. But at the end of the day, it's still the one country that stands up for Israel's right to defend itself, defends it in the UN in Geneva, defends it in the UN in New York. And let's not forget, thousands of Israeli lives, and I would even say thousands and thousands of Palestinians' lives have been saved because of Iron Dome. And it was the United States who invested in it, who joined with Israel's vision, and it has made a tremendous difference in this struggle. And at the end of the day, with all the disagreements and all the differences, now, the United States is not in support of Hamas. It is in support of Israel. And there will be no ceasefire without the intervention of the U.S. And so, yeah, we can be unhappy from time to time. But all in all, this is still the only country that stands up for Israel. Look, in Latin America in the last 24 hours, 5 countries from Venezuela to Brazil to El Salvador to Peru and Chile have called back their ambassadors. What hypocrisy is this? In Europe, you see, you know, the demonstrations in the streets full of anti-Semitism. So, yeah, I know we'd like it to be a little bit better. We'd like American support to be 100%. But even when it isn't, it's still the strongest ally that Israel has.
Abe, as you were offering your remarks, we had a screen grab from our parent website, Newsmax.com, the headline reading, an Israeli diplomat basically saying that criticism of John Kerry did not come personally from Prime Minister Netanyahu, at least not publicly. But Abe, what you're saying about the United States' strong alliance with Israel, and sadly what is happening in terms of world opinion to the perception of Israel, doesn't that underscore the need for support that cannot be mistaken and cannot be confused? And I would return to Mrs. Clinton, not only her statement yesterday, whatever you think of that, but you may recall in her biography, Mrs. Clinton wrote of Palestine as being, quote, occupied territory. So when you get these kind of comments, Does that not give you a little pause to hear that?
No, it really doesn't. You know what? That's semantics. It really doesn't mean very much. Whether you say occupied or not, some of Israel's greatest friends, some of the Israelis have called it occupied. So what? There are really no consequence. Look, I'll tell you what troubles me. As I look out in the world, I see Muslims killing Muslims. I see them killing Muslims by the thousands, by the tens of thousands in Syria. I see Muslims killing Muslims in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. In Iraq, Muslims are killing Christians. They're destroying mosques and churches. And there's an indifference in the world. There are no cameras out there. There are no editorials. There are no demonstrations in the streets of Paris, of Rome, or London. It seems that only when Jews, in their own defense, defending their men, women, and children, are forced to kill Muslims and Palestinians, that's when the world wakes up. That's when the world demonstrates.
And Abe,
Let's
talk about that, because yesterday Israel bombed a UN school being used as a shelter and we've heard Israel come out very quickly and say these schools in fact have been used for rocket installations from Hamas militants and so forth and so on. But does Israel risk losing a PR battle? We know they've been fighting that battle on that front as well, very much out in front of what's taking place there. But as these civilian casualties continue to mount up, how cautious does Israel need to be about the message it's putting out there globally?
There's no question that as people look at dead children, and there are dead children, more than half the population in Gaza is under the age of 18. When the Hamas puts them in harm's way, when it tells them to be shields, when it refuses them the right to evacuate, when Israelis make calls and send leaflets, when they put rockets in UNRWA schools, when their command headquarters is in hospitals, they are cynical about the lives of Palestinians, because for them, this is public relations that will work in their favor. They value death, not life. Yeah, Israel has been trying to act with restraint, but there have been over 2,000 rockets that have been directed towards Israeli populations, not military bases, to men, women, and children, living. Now 2/3 of Israel, it has to live nearby shelters. Yes, you're right, it will impact, but there is a moral equivalency where it shouldn't be. Everybody says the violence has to stop on both sides. In a way, that's almost nonsense. The violence has to stop on one side. Once Hamas stops sending rockets, there will be no violence in the area.
Abe, let me return to something you mentioned in passing, and that is the demonstrations we are seeing across Europe. Anti-Israel demonstrations, or quite simply anti-Semitic. And the second question I have out of that is, how much of this is homegrown, European generated? How much of it is the influx of immigrants from the Middle East and other Islamic countries into places like France and the United Kingdom?
Many of those who come to demonstrate against Israel want to harm Jews. We are seeing anti-Semitic violence, anti-Semitic insinuations. We're seeing demonstrations moving from Israeli embassies to synagogues, to Jewish stores. A Jewish museum in Norway was closed because of threats. So yes, there is an element of anti-Semitism. It is brought about by a large number of fundamentalist Muslims, or Muslims who are anti-Semitic. The ADL did a poll of the world about 2 months ago, and we found the highest level of anti-Semitism in the Middle East and North Africa. Now, these are human transfers from the Middle East who bring with them their anti-Semitism.
We'll have to leave it right there, Abe. We thank you very much. Abe Foxman of the Anti-Defamation League, thank you so much for your time checking in from Newsmax, New York. We appreciate it very much. Always good to get Abe's take on that.
Always great to get Abe's take. Of course, he's the author of that book, Viral Hate. Interesting to talk to him as well about the use of online media in recruiting some of these anti-Semitic and terrorist organizations.
Speaking of online and the internet, those missing IRS emails, we'll talk about that next.